Does the current hospitality operational culture need to change? And if so, why? Who benefits from this transformation? And exactly how is this evolution supposed to take place? And whose responsibility is it to start the process? It's no news to our audience here that the food and beverage industry has taken it on the chin ever since the pandemic shutdown, and 6 million hospitality professionals lost their jobs. Everywhere you turned, there was another article about how terrible working conditions were in the industry. And gosh, why would anybody want to go back to that? Well, as it turns out, the Burnt Chef Project did a survey which told us that as of the folks who left the industry during that time, whether on their own terms or not, 70% said they plan to re-enter the food and beverage workforce within 18 months. For most of us in the craft, the news of toxic workplace cultures comes as no surprise. Indeed, some of us, myself included, perpetuated the toxicity, deluded by the notion that mission comes first, or as we were treated, so we shall treat others. The sad reality is that what the new associates are asking for right now is the same thing, or same things that we wanted, I wanted, but we're too scared to ask. That's why it's so great to have chef, CEO, and owner Rory Schepisi from Forking Good Restaurant Group in the studio to tell us of the successes and challenges she and her team have faced as they set out not only to change the landscape of restaurant dining in Amarillo, Texas, but to co-create a workplace culture that serves everyone equally. If you're looking for the roadmap to building a better workplace culture, you definitely want to stick around for this one. Welcome to another episode of Turning the Table. My name is Chef Adam Lamb of Chef Life Coaching, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60, who unfortunately is out with the flu. So this is a day that he gets to take care of himself, self-care, self-nurture. His body's telling him he's got to slow down. So we're going to give him the day off. We're dedicated to bringing solutions to the hospitality industry's most persistent challenges. As always, we will discuss real-world examples of what's working in the hospitality industry and give you 3 actionable ideas to help restaurant owners and managers improve employee retention rates. Remember to share this episode, follow us on your favorite podcast player, and please leave us a review. It really does help have others to find it. Links to the videos and others things discussed in the show can be found in the comments and the show notes. If you'd like to partner with us on Turning the Table and get in front of over 4,000 progressive hospitality professionals every week, DM me, Adam Lamb, and we're going to talk to chef, CEO, and owner Rory Schepisi right after these messages.
Welcome to Turning the Table, the most progressive weekly podcast for today's food and beverage industry, featuring staff-centric operating solutions for restaurants in the hashtag New Hospitality Culture. Join Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 and Adam Lamb as they turn the tables on the prevailing operating assumptions of running a restaurant in favor of innovative solutions to our industry's most persistent challenges. Thanks for joining us. And now, on to the show.
Chef.
How
Rory
are
Schepisi.
you?
Well, no stranger to the media. Chef is the founder and CEO of Forking Good Hospitality Restaurant Group. Rory's opened up her 3rd restaurant, Drunken Oyster, in Amarillo, Texas, which has grown to be known as one of the best restaurants in Amarillo. She's also got a tapas bar. She's one of the handful of chefs to be honored with a grant from the James Beard Foundation in 2020, and she was just recently honored to be and selected with only 80 other female chef operators by the Texas Restaurant Association. Welcome, Chef.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
Oh, this is going to be such a great conversation.
It is. I'm excited.
So the whole thing started with this exchanging a couple DMs, and one of the things that you wanted to talk about was hospitality culture and how it's changed, and how like kind of old way thinking versus new way thinking. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, how are you, really? This is a temperature chart that was developed by chowco.org, who provide peer-to-peer hospitality support for professionals, and they do, I think, a Zoom call every night of the week for folks who are just looking for a place to be and land and really talk about what's going on for them. So they developed this temperature chart where you can kind of pick out where you're at. So I would say, Chef, how are you really right now? Medium rare, medium well, rare. Like,
I'm pretty well, if it comes to beef, I'm going to say rare to medium rare. When it comes to reality, probably medium rare to medium right now.
That's beautiful. And what's also interesting is as they list the different emotions that are attached to these temperatures, you can see it's glad, for medium, it's glad, amused, patient, grumpy, present. So I guess you could be like on either end of the spectrum and still call yourself medium. I would say I'm between medium rare and rare. I'm awfully excited to have you on the show. A little sad that Jim can't be here with us because I know he'd always add some really great context for the conversation. But yeah, so I think it's just a really great question, because typically in our industry, as you're walking past, like, how you doing? Yeah, shaking your head and just keep booking. And instead of stopping and saying, hey, like, we recognize when someone's struggling, right? You can, the energy all over them, whether they're
Oh,
breathing
for
really hard
sure.
or whatever. And typically it would be that, we don't stop to ask them because, we've got enough on our plate, and God, please don't open up that can of worms. But I don't think we can ignore um, the things that have been impacting the industry for a long time: addiction, mental health awareness, and that kind of stuff. And for us as chefs, managers, owners, to actually stop and say, hey, how are you, really? And just be there for a couple minutes while they tell you, I think is really important, because the new associates, they want to be seen, heard, valued. They want to be recognized as whole human beings instead of just a pair of hands in the kitchen or on the front of the house. And I know that that's not always where our mindset is, right? Our mindset is like, got to get the job done, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I just
Go
think
ahead.
that's something that, we, especially leaders in the hospitality industry, have to make that time and make that effort to start that transition of what the industry was to what the industry needs to become.
Well, that is an interesting place to start.
How
So
about that?
yeah, perfect. And from what I understand, you started in this industry sometime in the 1880s. Is that what you said when you went to culinary
It
school?
was about 1800. I was at the Culinary Institute of America, back in those days. And, the culture that we were raised at the CIA was very much European style of culinary training. So being a woman, and I was young, I was only 17 years old when I started there.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, I didn't have that much experience in the industry itself, except for my family's restaurant, bussing tables, just helping out in that aspect, and knowing that I wanted to, go into the kitchen and create these amazing dishes and see people's faces as my food came out. But going to the school was a completely different thing. These European chefs, and this one of my chefs, a German chef, he hated that I was in his class. He hated it. And he just, always said, women don't belong in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I was like, wait a second, isn't that an oxymoron? Because people would say pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen for women, So it was just such a different, I was like, what is happening? And, that stood with me for a long time. I was like, this guy thinks that I don't belong in here. And, that's crap. I don't feel that way. And I'm going to show him what's up.
So that's interesting. So instead of like being a victim of his attitude and taking
Yeah.
that on as the truth, and affecting your mental balance and emotional balance moving forward, you use that as fire, as fuel for your fire to probably, you've been on a ton of TV shows. You've done so much in such a short time. So like, how did you use that juice?
So I think, it's crazy being a woman in this industry. There's so many people who can take it one way and be very affected by what other chefs say, or what, other business people say. Or you can, as you said, let it fuel your fire and be like, all right, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong, because I know my ability. I know what I'm good at. I know what I can do. I know what I can accomplish. And, screw you guys, because I'm going to make it happen, whether you like it or not. Watch, because it's going to be something to watch, And so many women in the industry, they feel like they're being victimized, but you're allowing that to happen. Just because someone's saying something to you doesn't mean you actually have to listen to it and let it, consume you.
Do you think that there's a certain amount of your success right now that is still fueled by that same asshole?
Oh, 100%. 100. I meet these assholes every day still.
It's
Yeah,
amazing that it even exists anymore, but
but it does. It absolutely does. And even, being in Amarillo, Texas, being a strong, vocal woman is not something that a lot of these men are used to.
or as your
And
father would say, New Jersey truck driver.
Yes, yes. My dad loves my language. If he's watching, I know he fucking loves it.
Yeah. Well, it certainly grabs
Sorry,
people's
Dad.
attention. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Have some such filthy words coming out of such a pretty face.
Yes.
I know that's just terribly patronizing, but it just.
I know, and that's the restaurant. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, and that's what I always say when I am sitting down to interview somebody. I always ask them, one of my questions that I interview is, "What offends you?"
Mm.
You
And
know,
why do you ask that? Why do you ask that?
because unfortunately, the reputation of the hospitality industry, especially the kitchen reputation, is that we're a bunch of foul mouth, kind of low life. We're going to say what we feel.
Dirty kitchen
Sometimes
pirates.
dirty kitchen pirates.
Yep.
And I've been there, and I'm not offended by it, but especially I'd say in the last 10 years, it has become a growing thing where, as we talked about, that culture is slowly shifting because people are offended. And, for me, my biggest thing is, hey, don't ever curse on my floor. Don't talk derogatory on the floor in the front of the house. But the back of the house, it was kind of like a free for all, like you were just able to say what you wanted to say in the back of the house. And slowly, as we've been opening these restaurants, and our employees went from 30 employees up to 150 employees, and so many different types of people coming together, it's been changing. And especially now, we have younger kids working. It's hard to get people who want to work right now. So for like hostesses or bussers, or, they tend to be getting younger. I have 14, 15-year-olds working in my restaurant, and I have to protect them.
Yes, you do. Absolutely.
And I have to make sure that this derogatory talk in the kitchen that you and I might be very used to isn't happening in front of these younger children, because we are actually helping develop them right now.
Yeah. I definitely want to get into the conversation about that paradigm shift that needs to occur if you're going to be successful going from a chef to owner. But I also just wanted to take a second, and this show is not about beating anybody up for who they are in the moment, or a perspective that they might have in the moment, because all that can change over time, and with a certain amount of guidance, coaching, and leading, modeling what that looks like, so they got something to see and actually, oh, that's the way it's supposed to be. But there have been institutional issues in our industry for a long time. It makes me laugh when the guys are like talking about, women don't belong in the kitchen. It's it was originally a nurturer's position, right?
Yep.
The women were taking care of the food all the way back time immemorial, because that was a way to create sustenance and balance within the family. And then all of a sudden it became a man's thing. Like, it's still a nurturer thing. So if anything, it's actually speaking to the feminine in us to be in that position of service to anybody else. So that, if nothing else, that should be enough to say, oh, well, we're not that different, right? I had the great pleasure of, well, it wasn't a pleasure at the time, not that I thought, but my very first chef that I worked under was a woman. And she made sure to visit every single slight and crap that she had ever had to eat coming up. And she made sure that I knew what that was like. And when I became my very first executive chef job, I was blessed with Rory Walker, who was sorry, she saved my ass so many times. And so I'm very, very grateful and aware of, how the feminine balances the masculine in the space where, it's about getting the job done, but it's also about, having your heart open, because, angry cooks make shitty food.
I say that all the time. I say, I said, if you're happy, your food's going to go out happy. I use that all the time. And it's true, because if you're aggressive on the line, it completely ruins the rest of the line. It's a domino effect.
We're getting Greg Orgone is saying in the chat, it's one thing hearing from your staff, but how do you handle guests that treat your staff poorly? There seems a thing these days with some customers. And I agree with that, especially since the reopening after COVID, when everybody was so desperate to be in relationship with one another. Oh, we'll go to the restaurant. Well, how come half the restaurant's empty? Why can't I? And so I don't think most of the public was aware of the challenges that we were having reopening. But talk to me a little bit about your experience coming up as a woman in a male-dominated field, what it was like then, and some of the shifts that you've seen happen since then.
So, as I said, starting off, it was at CIA, it was very different, for a woman. We were definitely the minority at the Culinary Institute of America. And, chefs were harder on us just because they didn't think we had the ability. I've never been this giant feminist. That's never been my thing. So I didn't take it in an offensive way. I kind of took it as this chef's a douche, and moved on. But as I started growing in my career and myself, I realized that it was harder for people to take you seriously as a female chef. You had so many of these amazing, talented male chefs that getting your foot in the door as a female was a little bit harder. I also, for me, if I was on the line, and I was yelling at my team, trying to get them back into the game, just say, our ticket times were, running longer than 20 minutes. And, I'm being that tough person trying to get everyone's head back in the game, or I throw somebody off my line to go take their position to catch them up. Instead of it being like, thanks, chef, I appreciate it. It was, she's a bitch, she's a bitch to work for,
Wow. Which might be that you're just tough and exacting. It's not necessarily the fact that, you're a woman.
Right. Right. But if it was a guy, they, 90% of the time, and I see it today, as I've shifted to being an owner more than being on the line and dealing with landlords or business deals, it's not okay for me to speak to them the way I'm speaking to you right now.
Correct.
Like, they want me to kind of cower down and be like,
What do you mean, little lady? It's a long contract. You probably didn't have time to read it, but let me tell you, it's in your best interest. Like, how the hell do I know that?
Believe me, somebody I'm doing a deal with right now sent me an email saying that I had Tourette's because I cursed while speaking to them. Oh. And literally, I curse, but that's who I am.
Yeah. And I think that was another one of reasons why I was so excited to have you on the show, is because we started talking about, old ways of thinking and doing versus new ways of thinking and doing. And yet you're a product of that particular old ways of being. And yet now you're taking that, from what I understand, you're taking that as, again, kind of like fuel for the fire to actually change what's actually happening now that you're in that position to change it. Would that be correct?
Yeah, 100%. So for instance, one of my general managers, well, actually both my general managers, Tim and Mike, and then one of my ECs, Albert, we all were kind of raised in the past generation of hospitality. And now, especially, post COVID, the way we all are is fine with each other, but we've been having to learn to transition ourselves to become softer, to be able to handle our teams a little more gingerly than what we used to. And it's hard.
Why is it hard?
I think it's hard because I don't know if we have a thicker skin because we grew up that way. Is it okay? No, it's not okay. We probably shouldn't have had to deal with that as we were coming up the ranks. And so when staff is coming to us and being like, don't talk to me that way, or why is this person speaking to me this way, or I was offended by what this person said, we now have all had to kind of sit back and say, well, all right, that didn't offend us, but our culture was so different then. How do we make this person feel safe?
Right.
How do we?
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. How do we make them? Sorry.
No. Which is crazy because, as I surmised at the top of the show, I don't think anybody's asking for anything that we didn't want as we were coming in. Yet, for me, speaking only for myself, I looked around and I felt like, there's no way I can ask for this, or they're just going to laugh me right out of the building.
Yeah.
Right. So I made the decision to shut up, push my stuff down, and work even harder so that I could get in a position to change things. But the fact that they're more vocal about it, the fact that they're like, I'm sorry, you can't talk to me that way. You know, you're taking away my, like, whatever that conversation is. Okay, so the pendulum swings from one side all the way to the other side. So it now becomes histrionic or, you know, demonstrative. And yet I know that it's going to kind of settle in the middle where there's this perfect blend of the operations needs versus the associate needs. And if we're not the ones that are actually showing that that's possible, then everybody just kind of goes like, yeah, I guess it's still the old way, right? I mean, didn't you want to be seen, heard, and valued? You didn't want to have anybody talking crap to you while you were coming up.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a big thing that for all people in this industry, we have to look at everyone as a whole and say, is there one person there who is being cruder or taking the group down? Is there that one employee that might have all the talent in the world, but they just don't have the personality? I don't want to even say personality, the empathy to be able to control themselves, to not offend others. And is it somebody in your group that's constantly getting complaints about? And sometimes that's, you know, that's the person that you have to look at, whether it's yourself, one of your general managers, you know, or just, you know, one of the team players. You have to look at that and say, okay, is this person doing more damage than good, even if they have all the skills in the world?
I couldn't agree more, you know, and gosh, it's just so much to talk about.
There's so much.
You know, and I think it's probably important to state right now, like, it's easy to forget how far we've come because there's still so much further to go. But I think it's important for us to like take a look around and take stock of the fact, like, yeah, I remember days when, you know, I just wanted to crawl in a hole. And it was all I could do to survive the shift. And the fact that there's less and less of that out there. And really the only people who are going to propagate or perpetuate that type of mentality is us, right? Because we're the ones who actually like, oh, no. I got beat up when I was coming up. And that's exactly what, you know, because it toughened me up, or I matured that way, or any kind of that bullshit story, when in fact, there's all kinds of ways to, again, model mature professionalism so that immature professionals can actually look at that and go, oh, well, if he can do it, then so can I. Or if she's doing it, that's who I want to become.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, we need to set a new standard, and that's what it comes down to. How do we take an industry with so many people and turn it into a positive light? I know that sounds crazy.
No,
and that's what we have to figure out. And it's a puzzle with missing pieces. How do we create a culture within our own environment and spread it to the rest of the hospitality industry and make something that has been kind of a dark place for so long, you know, bright, light, happy, and fun, and a place that people want to come back to. You know, we lost so many people during the pandemic, but I feel that it was happening even before the pandemic, and the pandemic was just a scapegoat for the rest of them to be like, bye.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. I told like a great excuse to leave. Thanks very much. So another thing that I want to pivot to, and so you being a chef and restaurateur, I think you'd probably be the perfect person to, again, kind of respond to this comment about, you know, dealing with staff is one thing, but how do you also handle the guests who are perhaps not understanding? They have their own agenda, they're rude. Like, how do you actually do that? Because to Greg's point, seems like there's a lot of that going on. I don't know if that's true or not, because I always remember that there was those guests, right? That we're going to need a little bit of hand holding. And that's why I so loved when a server came back into the kitchen and said, listen, I've been talking to this guy. He's like, want to argue with me. And then I walk out there in the starched white jacket and all, is there a problem, sir? Oh, no.
No,
right?
not at all. Not to you. Not to you. There's a problem.
Right.
But now that server's tip's gone. You know.
But
Um,
I can't abide, like, if I'm going to instruct my associates to, not engage in name calling, be respectful to one another, and have a certain amount of propriety within our conversation, then I can't, allow a guest to dump on another teammate just because they're the one with the cash in their hand.
I
So,
agree with you. I do believe also there's two sides to the story because I have dealt with both sides. Just being that business owner, you will always have those employees that sometimes feel that they are owed by their guests, which I'll get into that in a second. But talking about Greg's question, we don't tolerate people mistreating our staff.
yes.
And that is not okay. But we also need to make sure that that is the situation, and
Right.
it's not an employee who's just had a bad day, who's taking their grievance out on a guest, or in the fact that a guest is not getting the service that we always provide.
Correct.
And so there's a line there. Now, if a guest is just being unruly and a complete asshole, I don't have a problem telling them to get out. We are going to protect our team. That's our family. That's that's my restaurant family. If I don't have those guys, I don't have anything. They are the ones who are doing, running my business every day. They're the ones selling for us. They're the faces that make people want to come back. And first and foremost, I protect them. I went through a situation. This happened actually 2 weeks ago here in Amarillo. We went to dinner and everything was fine. We asked for our check. Well, everything was not fine. The service sucked, but it was terrible.
Just call
but,
it.
And being in the industry, I tip very well because I know what everyone goes through. Whether they're having a hard day, I tip very well. But I asked this one in particular server, I said, hey, we didn't get these 3 items. Would you mind taking them off the check? And she was like, I'm a little busy right now.
Ooh.
And I was like, okay, well, we'll wait, when you have a second, because we didn't get these items, I'm not going to pay for them. And so she comes back over about 15 minutes later. She still has not removed them off the check. I said, hey, do me a favor. I said, I need to get these off. We're running late. We need to go. And she was like, I don't have time to do that right now. And I said to her, you can either remove them off the check or I'm going to take it out off your tip. And that's not typical something I ever do.
Right.
But this is, come on, as a server, don't do that. Make a long story short, I did. I mean, I still tipped her. I think it was like $25, but she would have gotten probably $60 in a tip, which is great money for the 45 minutes we were there. And we went to walk out and she chased us out and she was cursing at us, screaming at us.
Wow.
How dare we tip that way? And then said, I know you're a restaurant owner. I'm going to bash the shit out of your restaurants to make sure no one goes there. So there's 2 sides. And for me, that's an employee that is going to hurt your business.
Right.
But then you have guests that will hurt your business too. So it's just, but first and foremost, what it comes down to is my team, is my family. I protect them. If I have an unruly one who shouldn't be there, then they shouldn't be on my team.
Yeah, feeling a little sassy. And to Greg's point, I would also add that, dealing with these types of folks in these types of situations does not necessarily need to be, a drama, right? It can be done very professionally, very low key, and have that solve the situation without drawing a lot of attention to the situation, right? Because you also want to protect everyone else's experience, right?
100%. And you walking out, that's such a perfect example. And for some reason, us as being the leaders, we tend to have that ability to be able to just show our presence, and it kind of squashes situations.
Yeah, and I've always been amazed. It's like I don't know if it's the jacket and the apron or the a way of being when you're in it. Like a costume that you put on and all of a sudden, your shoulders are a little back and your head's a little higher and, you've got a little bit of, in your stride. And I never experienced that anywhere else, but it's just amazing the transformation that comes over when that is in the dining room That's why I so love to like tear the walls down between the front of the house and back of the house, because the servers need to know that I'm there to support them too, right?
Yep.
This is not competition between the front house, back house. It's a whole house, and we're gonna all do it together, or we're not gonna do it at all. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of a chef who is now a restaurant owner and a multiple unit owner, and the changes that you needed to take on. Because I take it in one or more of your restaurants, they won't allow you to cook, right? They won't allow you on the line.
So this is quite interesting too,
Isn't it?
because going from being a chef and handing over the reins to other people is, I'm sure, Adam, you understand this. It is very difficult to let go of control. I had a really dear friend of mine, Keith Newman, say to me, do you want to be a chef or do you want to make money?
Yeah.
And I said, can I do both? And he kind of looked at me and shook his head, was like, no, because if you're on the line, you're not being able to watch your numbers. You have so many places, that you need to be looking over. You can't be on that line. And that was kind of depressing to me. So when I opened Drunken Oyster, I had, who's basically my partner. He's the EC for our company. Albert, him and I, we would rock that line and we loved it. And it was time for us to start growing. And then I started building Savor during the pandemic, which was insane of me, but aren't we all insane in this industry?
Yes, ma'am.
And I hired a chef, Chef Tyler, and he came from Colorado. And he's worked other female chefs. So I was like, this is perfect. He's totally going to get my deal. And then I slowly realized that our conversations, were kind of getting harder when it came to me being like, hey, I want you to use this recipe. I want you to do it this way. And he was just like, whose kitchen is this? And I was like, initially, I was like,
wow,
this is my kitchen. Yeah, exactly. And then, it took me a minute to have to constrain myself to not be offended that this guy didn't want me in his kitchen.
Right.
And, as we spoke about it earlier, it was hard for me to just be like, okay, I'm throwing my hands up. I'm trusting in you. I will always oversee. That's who I am. I'm a chef by nature. Right. But it's hard. It's definitely hard to switch over. But now we're getting ready to open up our third place in Amarillo called Western Horseman. And thank you. And then we are taking our road, our show on the road and moving to the Dallas area. So we're opening up a Drunken Oyster in Farmers Branch. And it just, for me to be able to grow like this would be impossible for me to still be on the line every day.
Right. And, now you're dealing with geography, places being away from one another. I think from the guest perspective, there's probably a little bit of expectation that no matter which restaurant they're in, you're on the line, right? Because Rory, chef owner. And the reality is that doesn't exist. I remember a high-flying chef in South Florida, Mark Minatello, opened up, I think, 3 or 4 different restaurants. And that was the wrap. Like, you go in there and like, oh, well, Mark's not on the line today. Well, how could he possibly, right? And so I also acknowledge that, as you rise in rank and responsibility and you get known for your performance, the opportunity to run more complex organizations arises. And I can't tell you how many times I've been with other chefs who say, look, I haven't picked up my knife all day. Like, I just want to go cook.
Yeah.
Right. Can I just go cook something? I'm going to go hang out with the banquet crew for a while, and I'm going to, make 15 gallons of bisque or whatever, just to get back to that thing that feeds our heart so much. So I get what you're saying about like having to remove yourself and also to empower the people under you to actually run it like their own, because you need that. If in order for you to grow, you need those key people in those positions in order to continue your dream. And like, how far are you going to take this? Like, where does your mind go in 5 years? Is it now 15 restaurants? Like, where do you see yourself growing?
I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. How about that? It's the hospitality industry is super addictive for, so many people. I'm sure, most of us have tried to get out a time or two, and we end up coming right back to it. It's, we were all blessed with a gift, And mine just happens to be in the field of hospitality. And I really don't know what I would do if I wasn't in hospitality. I said, my dad, so many times, he's an attorney. And my sister switched from being a lawyer to a politician, and he's like, hey, I'll pay for you to go to law school. And this was after I already owned a restaurant. I'm like, this is what I do, so I don't see any stopping. We will be, as I said, Drunken Oysters, going to be opening in Dallas. We're negotiating the deal for Savor to go down to Dallas as well. And then I just see us continuing to grow. I want to also give opportunity to all the people who have worked with me, my team members, to become owner operators, to become, to be able to have a piece of that pie. And maybe they don't have the financials to be able to do that, but they have put that sweat equity in, and they deserve it. And so many people don't get that opportunity because of the, financial side of things. And so for me, it's being able to give these incentives to create a great team and them to have something to look forward to. And people aren't going to run a business unless they have a little bit of, their hand in there.
Sure.
And so I think it's important for those that, have showed me the loyalty, the dedication, the hard work, the creativity, that, they deserve a piece of the pie.
Well said. You earlier mentioned this idea of, if you're in the hospitality industry, you're addicted, or you have an addictive personality.
Yeah.
That lands with me because I also recognize that need in me. I got into the industry because I was looking for a community to belong to. I never had this idea of like my type of cuisine or Adam's going to have. It was like hanging with a really rock solid crew and kicking the shit out of the night. So I guess I wanted to ask you, addicted to what? What are we addicted to? What are you addicted to?
Oh God, it's basically, so food to me is very intimate. So if you think about it, like, all right, have you ever gone to the hibachi restaurants and they seat you down at a table of 15 and you don't know those other people at the table? A lot of people have a hard time with that, like, because food is intimate. It's, it's something that, it can bring people together. It can draw people apart depending upon, like, there's so much to it. But for me, when I was, 15, 16, when my parents weren't home, I would throw open house parties with my friend Fletch, and we would charge $5 to get in. I mean, we made it a business at, 15, 16, 17 years old. And we would end up, and when the keg ran out, we'd call the cops on ourselves to get everybody out, so it wasn't our fault. But after it was over, like, we were just so, like, we would sit back and be like, everyone had such a blast. It was such a good time, and people would be talking about it for weeks. And I think the part of the enjoyment of watching people's smiles on their faces, or, when they're taking a bite of something or a sip of one of our cocktails, or just looking at the atmosphere at one of our establishments and seeing like the wow factor on them, that's something I'm addicted to. I'll never get enough of that. I just, I love that. And so creating new places that wows people is something I'm addicted to. The fact that we have a built-in family is the other thing I'm addicted to. I live 1,400 miles from my family.
Right.
So I have, my spouse Cody here and our daughter, but my restaurant family are the people who are with me 24/7, basically. And I'm addicted to that. It's kind of a and that's selfish of me because it's a built-in family.
Right. I think it's easy to forget in the grind or in the push that, if we pull ourselves all the way back and look at it kind of unemotionally or neutrally, we're taking something that was alive and had recently perished, and now we're going to turn it into something. We're going to put our hands on this thing that someone is going to put in their mouth and take through their body. Yeah. Right. I mean, like, that is crazy intimacy. And if we don't treat it with that kind of sacredness that it actually is, like, they're taking me, they're taking who I am with this dish, and they're going to put it in their bodies. And I get to either treat that with respect or not.
I love that. And it's true. A big thing with my team members is I talk about the fact that we are being invited into some people's most personal moments, whether it's a birthday, a anniversary, a funeral, a divorce. We're there for some of the highest moments and some of the lowest moments. And, we should be honored to be considered, allowed to be part of that. And let's treat those situations with the most respect and, gratitude and hospitality that we can, and that's a big part also about training and teaching people to read their guests or read it, fellow employees. We need to, it's crazy. So I went to one of Danny Meyer's seminars in New York, and it was called Creating Raves, but they talk about charitable assumption. And charitable assumption is one of your employees comes in, they're having a bad day, there might be 15 minutes late, but instead of just getting on their ass like we would have done back in the day,
Right.
is making sure this person's okay first. Is something happening at home that's creating a situation for you to be running late? Is there something that you need to talk to somebody about? And I think that's something huge for our industry to try to add in everywhere that we can.
I couldn't agree more. And there's a couple programs currently out there. I Got Your Back is one that comes to mind right now, where it's incumbent upon us that we actually take the time to ask those questions. And typically in a coaching and counseling session, that's the first question. Listen, is everything okay at home? Because you seem to be a little off. And no, everything's fine, Jeff. Oh, really? Because you do know what our standard is for this particular policy, right? I mean, you signed the paper, right? Yeah. So if everything's cool at home and you're still not, your performance is still lower than what the bar is, then you need to tell me what's going on, right? And that's, I guess, and, they almost like put their own head in the noose. It's like but they start owning their way of being instead of it making, like, again, being a victim of the situation. Jeff, I have enjoyed this greatly. And I know our listeners are just getting off on this big time. And I want to be respectful of your time. So I just have one more question for you. And I would ask, in this particular point of your career, what's the one thing that you worry about most?
Oh, the one thing I worry about is, to be honest, hospitality changing, the service industry changing. There's it changing too much. So for me, there are situations where people, want to get rid of the tip factor. And I believe that would ruin hospitality. That would ruin the quality of service of people if everybody was just making the same amount. That is the joy of sitting down and allowing this person to put on basically, to do their thing. It's for every server, it's their own individual business. Those can make as much as they want or as little as they want, depending upon, their style. And I think us being able to sit down and go through that whole experience of dining at the table and the hospitality of it, it scares me that that's going away. It scares me, all the fast food. It scares me, the quick casuals that, people just don't care anymore. It scares me that there's so many pre-made products that's, freezer to fryer. That scares me. There's people who call themselves chefs that don't know how to fillet a fish or break down, a ribeye roll. And they think that taking something out of their freezer and throwing it into some hot oil makes them a chef. Yeah. Those things scare me. The art, the culinary, the culinary arts going away scares me.
Yeah. I remember clearly there was a point in time where at culinary schools, in order to pass your butchery, you actually had to break down half an animal, right? Yeah. And now they do it with a slide deck, or teaching someone how to carve ice by putting an overlay and projecting it onto the ice. So they have to cut. There's, like, I get that there's some things that are more important than others as far as education is concerned, but nothing will ever replace prior education, being in the industry, and a desire to really know what it's about, which is, to me, is back in the day, you in some of these places out in the sticks, you'd get a half a lamb once a week, and now you got to make 7 dinners out of it, right? And there's nobody to help you but you. So there's definitely a part of the art that's missing. I concur with that. And I also understand that, you know, there will always be a place in our economy for restaurants who do it that way, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's something that we need to make sure stays that way. And, you know, you have the guests who don't want to pay the money for the quality, you know, and then you have the employees, some employees that just don't want to learn the art. And then you have other ones, and those are the ones that are working with our company with FGH. We make sure we send them out to like Ohio to certified Angus beef, where they can learn to break down a side of beef, where they can, you know, learn other cuts than just the typical ones that you can get pre-packaged. You know.
Yeah, I mean, the industries that serve us, you know, they've been very, very diligent about making sure that we've got product that represents the need, which is typically, you know, short staff. So here you go, it's chef ready. You know, they're ahead of the curve when it comes to that stuff. And you can't knock them because they're a service-based business and they want to be seen as a solution in the best possible scenarios. But I think that will probably be a narrative that is going on in the background for a long time. And I don't see how, like, I knew when sous vide came out that there was a restaurant that opened up in France that basically did everything sous vide, and it was a pot of water, 2 cooks, and a pair of scissors. And they were mobbed because the food was constantly consistent. Not great, but it was consistent all the way through. And so I think, there's a place in the market for that. There's a place in the market for what you do. There's a place in the market for what I do. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful, because it seems to be that that the generosity of the public will continue to show itself in those ways. By the way, we just got a couple of shout outs in the chat. Stephen Harris said, thank you very much. Great show, Rory. Best to you. And so,
thanks, Steve.
Everybody's digging it. And I want to say
awesome
to you, Chef Rory Schepisi, thank you so much. I wish you continued success. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to invite you back on, 6 months to a year to see how things are progressing. And, what did you have to run over in the road? What became roadkill, your ideas or your ambitions or.
Absolutely. I'll probably be bald, completely gray, being like, I'm on my 6th restaurant.
Aren't I doing good? So just one last question. What do you do for your own self-care? I mean, you're busy as hell. You got a partnership, you've got a child, you've got dogs barking in the background. I mean, what are you doing to take care of yourself?
So I work to travel. I work to go find adventures. So when I'm able to, I will take off and go someplace like to the Caribbean, to Europe, that's what I live for. I live for finding new adventures and on top, I mean, it all revolves around culinary and hospitality. So no matter where I go, I'm looking for new flavors. I'm looking for new styles of service. I can't get out of it. It's addictive.
See, that's not a vacation. That's what do they call it? That's a sabbatical. That's not a vacation. Sabbaticals don't count.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, thank you very much, Chef. This has been really great. I so appreciate your time. And to all our friends and listeners, Turning the Table, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
You bet.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Turning the Table with me, Adam Lamb, and Jim Taylor. We're on a mission to change the food and beverage industry for the better by focusing on staff mental health, physical and emotional well-being, by proactively measuring and managing staff workloads. Join other hospitality professionals co-creating the hashtag New Hospitality Culture by subscribing to our weekly newsletter at www.turningthetablepodcast.com/news. In every edition, you'll find innovative solutions ready to test and validate in your operation this weekend. Plus, listen to exclusive bonus content just for you. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Turning the Table Podcast. If you found value in this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Give us a star rating. It helps other hospitality professionals just like you find the show. Or better yet, grab the show link and share it with a friend or colleague who you want to see succeed. Thanks for stepping in and speaking out for an industry, craft, and fraternity that serves us all. Remember, retention is the new cool, y'all. This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, Adam Lamb, and Jim Taylor. Turning the Table is a production of Realignment Media.